Hi everyone, today we're going to look at Isaiah chapter 29, so grab your Bible, have a read of that, and let's go. I wonder, what's your best plan to save the world? Maybe you're looking at everything going on with COVID-19 and the economic turmoil and the political turmoil and the concern about developing countries and everything else going on, and you think, if only they did fill in the blank. The people in Isaiah 29 have a plan like this, a plan to save the world. And their plan is to ward off the coming invasion by aligning with Egypt. The problem is, God's already made it clear to them what the best way forward is for them. But they're not interested in hearing God's plans. In fact, in verses 9 to 13 of this chapter, we see that they're not interested in listening to God's plans at all. The leaders are drunk and blind, as we saw in the last chapter. But in that one, Isaiah was talking about the northern kingdom. Now he's talking about the southern kingdom. He says their leaders are just as bad. God's words make no sense to them. Their religion has no personal reality in verse 13. And in verse 13, of course, we get that danger of empty ritual, don't we? Of going through the motions without any real relationship with God. It's a verse that Jesus himself picks up on in Matthew 15, among other places. Go and check that one out. I'm not going to go into that now. So the leaders don't understand God's plans, and they've come up with their own. But in verse 15, we see that they're trying to hide their plans from God. But of course, God's response to that is, well, trying to keep anything from him is like a pot trying to tell the potter that he doesn't know what he's doing. So God's plan will happen. And we see in verse 14, God says, "Therefore once more I will astound these people with wonder upon wonder. The wisdom of the wise will perish, the intelligence of the intelligent will vanish." God's plan will happen. It will astound with wonder. But it will make the wise seem foolish. And this verse, again, is quoted in the New Testament. It's quoted in 1 Corinthians chapter 1. And in that passage, Paul is talking about how the message of the cross seems ridiculous. It seems ridiculous to the Jewish people who were looking for a sign of the coming Messiah. And they were looking for this all-conquering Messiah who would free them from oppression. So they trip over Jesus when he comes and miss the sign. And the message of the cross seems like foolishness, Paul says, to the Gentiles who were looking for wisdom. It seems foolish to them that God would die in humiliation on a cross. But that passage says to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. And later it says that Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. Stronger than human strength, wiser than human wisdom. See, if only Israel would listen to God, they'd know the way to go. They would know that God's wisdom is wiser than theirs, that God's plan is better than theirs. And we can take the same advice. We can look at the cross and see that God's wisdom is wiser than ours. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't have thought up anything like that. But God knew exactly what he was doing when he sent Christ. And he knows the way out of this situation as well. One of my favourite bands, Five Iron Frenzy, have a rather old song that reflects this idea. The song's called My Evil Plan to Save the World. Look it up. It's worth having a listen. I won't sing it to you, but the first verse goes like this. It says, "I have an evil plan to save the world for every man, and I think it's better than the way it's being run. The groundwork's laid. No, don't be afraid. I'm sure that I can fix it when I figure out the physics." And the chorus goes on, "My evil plan to save the world, just you wait till it's unfurled. It'll go down in history. It's prophetic. No, it's not pathetic. I can't believe I made it up myself." Ultimately, that last line is the problem with our plans, isn't it? We made them up ourselves. May we be free from thinking that we can come up with a better plan than God.